We pick up today in Genesis chapter 24 and verse 57. They said, "Let us call the young woman, Rebekah, and ask her." They were asking Rebekah, if you remember, whether or not she would go with Abraham's servant to marry Isaac and become his wife. A very long journey. She's never met Isaac. She's asked that question. "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." So then in verse 59, so they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, now remember, this is her family, her brother Laban and her mother, based on verse 55. They said in verse 60, they blessed her and said to her, "O sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him." Then Rebekah and her young women arose and rode on the camels and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Now Isaac had returned from Beer Lahai and was dwelling in the Negeb. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel, and said to the servant, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. Then Isaac brought her, that is Rebekah, into the tent of Sarah his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So Isaac here is probably somewhere around 40 years of age, and he is married. He has not been married before. He is out in the field meditating. Very interesting as Rebekah's coming, and then he begins to walk toward them. Now, what is that meditating? Some commentators that I have heard on this passage will say that is referring to Isaac is out in the field praying and thinking about the Lord and about what he's doing in his life. And then Rebekah's on the horizon. It is a very interesting picture that if Isaac was out there, if he was out there praying in the field alone with God, and on the horizon he sees these camels coming, and a veiled woman. She covers her face, she veils herself. The servant then comes up to Isaac, who went out to greet them. You know, sometimes we're out in the field, so to speak, meditating. We're praying with the Lord, and we may even be agonizing over some things in our hearts and in our souls. And the Lord is bringing the answer on the horizon. I think that's an important reminder for us that could perhaps be taking this passage a little bit too far in terms of spiritualizing the meaning rather than taking it literally. But there is some truth to the lesson that God is at work around us, and he will send the answer sometimes right as we're in the middle of a place alone with him. What we see here is the encouragement that God fulfilled the wish, the prayer of Abraham that his son would not have a heathen wife, but that his son would marry within the family. Rebekah is sent out by her family. They prophetically speak blessings over her, that she will have many children, that they will become a nation, possess the gate of their enemies. And we see Isaac hearing his servant tell the story here. Then he takes Rebekah, he marries her, and he's comforted. He apparently was still undergoing hardship since his mother has died. He loves Rebekah. And that is what we see set the stage for this marriage. Isaac will be a man who does not practice polygamy. He is a man who stays faithful to one wife throughout his life. And that leads us to an interesting thing we're going to see in our next episode. We see that Abraham, while he did have Sarah as his wife, and she has now passed away, and he did take Hagar as a wife for a time, and then she was sent away because of the prompting of Sarah, along with Ishmael. Now, we will see in our next episode in chapter 25 that Abraham takes another wife and has several more children. And it's very interesting what happens there. So we see remarriage take place, marriage after the death of a spouse. And we're going to look at that in our next podcast episode. So I hope you'll join me for that. And we'll dive in and see what the Word of God says in Genesis 25. God bless.